give your name and your university, and then
Yeah, I think name and university is pretty good. Maybe what you're working on, or maybe year.
right.
I think everyone's mostly a senior, but if anyone's not a senior.
And I guess just a brief overview too. So we have 2 teams of Maryland, 1 team from Gettysburg, 1 team from Ohio University, and 1 team from Ohio State University. And the Ohio State University students are working on the organization portal, so allowing organizations to create accounts and manage grants. You have Ohio University, which is working on a messaging system to allow users and organizations to communicate with each other. You have University of Maryland teams, which are working on a referral system. So either using a front end or a webhook API to communicate with these charities that are integrating into our system. And then the Gettysburg team is working on document uploader, document management, document sharing. So that will give a little bit of context once, just to do a brief introduction of what university you're from.
And I'd say anyone could just popcorn out, because I don't know if everyone's laid out the same.
All right, I'm Chris. I'm from University of Maryland, working on the webhook team, and I'm a super mega senior. So.
I guess I'll join in because I'm also from the University of Maryland. My name is Benson, and I'm on the Selenium team, and I'm a senior as well.
Why don't all the University of Maryland people go first?
All right, so I'm Emeka Okeke, senior University of Maryland, and I'm on the webhook team as well.
My name is Zach. I'm from Maryland, and I'm also on the webhook team.
My name is Matthew. I'm a computer science senior at the University of Maryland. I'm also on the webhook team.
Everyone on the University of Maryland attended.
All right, why don't Gettysburg, you go next since you're all on one laptop.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm from Gettysburg, and we're working on the file manager team.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm also from Gettysburg, also working on the file manager team.
And I'm Chase, also from Gettysburg, and same thing, working on the file manager team.
Nice.
All right, what about OSU?
Hi, I'm Amir, senior at the Ohio State University, working on the organization team.
I'm Aria. I'm also from Ohio State, and I'm also working on the organization team.
Hi, I'm Nikita. I'm a senior at the Ohio State University, and I'm also working on the organization team.
All right, and then OU, you can finish it up.
Hi, I'm Nat. I'm a senior, and I'm working on the messaging team.
Are you the only one from OU today?
Looks like Ethan is in the chat.
There.
You get like this thing to.
Oh, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
All right. Hi, my name is Ethan. I'm working with Nat on the messaging team. I'm senior at OU.
Nice. All right, and I think that is everyone. So I guess I will switch to share screen, which I hopefully can figure out. Share screen, where's share screen? Sorry, I originally had planned to use so video settings. Warren, do you know offhand how to switch to share screen?
It should say share at the bottom.
You have to mouse over the bottom part.
Alt plus S should also share screen.
Okay, I got it. Screen. Can anyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, you're good.
I guess I also have my video. I don't really need my video. All right. Okay, so this is the EC2 view, although we'll pop back and actually log out and log back in. Or I'll create a user, and then we will log in from that user account. So I created a dummy email a second ago. So I could have a user. And this will be inviting. So I guess to start, I'll just walk through what this kind of starting screen looks like. So for when you put in the Amazon Web Services, there's like a ton of services that you could mess with. What we'll go over is EC2. So this is their kind of like rent a server for an hour idea. We might go into Lambda, depending on how much time we have and how long people want to stick around. This is kind of like rent a function. So just pay for a function to be run and maybe timed in like seconds or sub-seconds. S3, we should definitely go over S3. This is kind of where you'd store your files. So this is a great place to just put files. Just think Dropbox, because Dropbox actually was just built on top of S3 originally. I don't think we'll go over any database things, although Dynamodb is a good one, especially if you're using Lambda. Dynamodb kind of works really nicely with Lambda. It's kind of like the NoSQL database that Amazon has built. We'll jump into IAM right away. This is how you can kind of manage users. This is also how you can set up once I create an account for you guys. This is how you can set up your MFA device, which is pretty important because with EC2, people can spin up servers and run them for a while and spin up pretty expensive servers. So if your account is like compromised, they could go into my EC2 and spin up lots of servers. So I like to have everyone add a MFA on their device. And then the other one that I think will come up for a lot of teams, or I guess I'll talk about, even though we won't go into it, CloudFront and Route 53 are pretty useful. So Route 53 is how you can kind of buy domain names and manage your domain names. And then CloudFront is how you can, I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a website and if the front of the URL said CDN, and then it loads really fast. Usually it's not the website itself, like a photo or a video will be on a CDN. Advertisements are almost always on CDNs. And so CloudFront is just a CDN, so it makes it so that your files are loaded really fast to users. What they do is they host the servers all over the country, all over the world, so that file, whenever you download that file, it finds the server closest to you, so it downloads really with low latency or lower latency. And the other one that I think everyone is likely to bump into is SES, and I'm simple email services. And this is kind of how you can send emails and actually receive emails as well, which is kind of annoying that like it's really easy to actually run an SMTP server, but you'll just get blocked. Like Gmail won't listen to your SMTP, but if you send it via Amazon, it will get, it won't get blocked by anything. So jumping in, I'll create a user. I will add a new user to this new email I just created, which would be what I'll do for you guys. I'll pretty much, right after this talk, I'll add every one of you guys to an account. I haven't added you guys yet because I need to create a nice security policy around each one of you guys. So you have permissions to do some things, but not permissions, like not full admin. And okay, so we're creating a user. I can go in here. This would be the, well, I'll go back 1 second. This will be the URL that you would log in with once I give you a user. And I'll post that detail once I do that. You'll see a bunch of users here. And I can click add a user. And so, and also, you guys could also do this with your own account. It's the only thing is when you create an account, you have to attach a credit card or a debit card to your account. Oops. Username, I will call that. And you sometimes need programmable access too. This comes up if you want to use like CyberDuck. So CyberDuck, if you have programmable access and access key and secret key, you can then have CyberDuck automatically manage your S3 bucket for you. That is usually pretty useful because it's kind of a hassle to click and drag like each file one by one, whereas CyberDuck would kind of let you manage. It's like let you manage all of your files at one go. And then usually I'll have it auto-generate the password and have you guys change it. So I'll walk through that exact same process. For this account, I'm just going to make an admin, but you can see you can actually, there's a lot of granularity in terms of controlling what a user can do. So maybe I'll come back to that. I'll show you guys kind of how you can do access control, although it won't be, maybe I won't show it because it's not particularly relevant to the type of work you guys would be doing. So I remember to remove it later on. All right, so that creates a user. Or will create a user. And then this will be its password, which I will put here. And most of the, I'll be doing this all in Windows. So there'll be a few steps which are kind of Windows specific, but on a Mac, there should be an equivalent. One of the trickiest points might be logging into a server. Like you need to know how to SSH into your server and how to SSH with a private key. So if you go to that URL, we do this new guy. So when I give you, I'll just pretty much give you these two pieces of information in this URL, and then this will be how you guys will log in. We'll sign in, and it's going to make you change your password. Just paste your old one, and then I don't know what the rules are, but I will just put a password. Confirm. I don't know if you guys should save it. I'm not going to save it. All right, so now you're in again. With your account, you can see which account you are in the top. Also up here, you can see what location you are. Some services are location specific, some services aren't. Like security, it makes sense that that's really not location specific. But this service, or some services are. Let's say like Ec2 is location specific because that's where the data center is. To get started, so we just created AWS. So you get that user, and this will be the first thing you should do once I help you create a user, is you go to security credentials, and you go to manage MFA devices, and you click manage, and then you'll do a virtual MFA, and then what you need to do is get, so this is Google Authenticator. Although there's other equivalents, but Google Authenticator, I think, was one of the first guys that made this. And it works on Android and iOS. It will look like something like They don't really show the icon, but anyways, you'll download that, and then like this guy, and then you can scan the QR code. That's what I'm about to do, although I can't show you really doing it. Well, I guess I could turn on my camera for a second. Yeah, why don't I? No, it's not that interesting, but you scan with you open up the app and you click add, and then you scan with the QR code, this QR code. And then now it requires you to type in, I guess this is where it would be kind of neat to show the camera. It's on my video. So it does something like this. It will show you a code, and then you just have to type that code in. 264. And then you have to wait till the code cycles. And then you type the next code. So that, I mean, some of you guys a lot of you guys are probably already familiar with MFA, but this is pretty much just how you'd set up an MFA on anything. I think it's good to set up MFA on almost anything, but definitely on my account, I want you guys to set up MFA. All right, so now it's associated. So now if I log out and log back in, it will force me to use MFA. So we'll pop back out. So that's done in terms of managing your user. I'll probably not give you full admin like this, so you probably won't see quite as much stuff. But so then we're going to jump into probably the most relevant service, which would be EC2. And then you'll notice that EC2 is location specific. So far, we've been running a lot of stuff out of Ohio, because Ohio had a cheaper price too. But you can see there's a lot of locations that you can work out of. And maybe, can I move this guy? Ah, there we go. There's a lot of locations you can work out of. But for the most part, I think everyone would be working out of Ohio, or maybe you can also try Northern Virginia. Those two have pretty good prices. Unless you guys have a really good reason, don't do the other locations. And let's go to, so the first thing you'll notice is like they do like a little overview screen, but the thing that you most likely touch is instances. So instances show you what's currently running and then let you jump into run more. So right now we have a few instances, kind of real small ones. The chat service, Zulp, is just running off of one of these. And I usually get a public IP address, so I'll talk about that later on. So that way the IP address gets, I usually get an elastic IP, so it doesn't get changed. Otherwise, Amazon can just change it on the fly from underneath me. And you'll notice that it'll tell you when it's running or stopped. So stopped, you'll get charged only for the hard drive. And when it's running, you get charged for the EC2 hours plus the hard drive. And just to give you an idea, EC2 pricing and EC2 specs. Instances, not Spot. So there's another thing called Spot, which lets you rent an instance kind of by auction. And then if you lose the auction, you won't have the instance any longer, but you usually get cheaper prices. So if you can kind of handle the fact that you may lose the instance on the fly, it can be a way cheaper way of running services. So just a few types of EC2 instances that they have. They have a bunch of general purpose ones now. They didn't used to have so many. I think usually I only mess with either a free one or M5s if I'm messing with general purpose. So M5 is kind of the real general purpose one, I'd say. This is like the most common general purpose. They used to have M4. And it's got a kind of a healthy mix of everything. It's got usually pretty fast hard drives and NVMe, really good networking, really good like high amounts of RAM. You can see you can get M5s can have RAM up to like 300 gigabytes, 300 almost 400 gigabytes. And then you get a large number of CPUs. And vCPUs aren't quite equal to CPUs, but it seems to be pretty close because I used to get the used to rent the actual dedicated instances, and then you get the real CPUs, and it's pretty close. And then there's a bunch of other types of machines. Another one that's pretty common is you often just need a compute machine. So these are just really heavy on the CPUs, and they're just good prices for the CPU, and usually have very good networking too. You might use this in that kind of cluster computing type operations, like math computing. Memory is nice for kind of database ones, like a huge Redis database or a Memcache. Accelerated computing, these are usually like very specialty, like using FPGAs or using GPUs, maybe deep learning type thing applications. Storage, another one where this could be a lot like, again, like a database, but maybe a distributed file system type setup, or a more of a database that's long-term storage. And so those are usually what you tap into. I'd say normally you'd probably just be doing a general purpose unless you have a really specific use. I used C5s a lot too, but I didn't really touch the other ones that much. And then just to give you an idea of the pricing, so you get an idea of what, like if you wanted to run something on here, what it would look like. So most of the time you're doing on demand, like unless you can handle the kind of spot version, or you can do a reservation, like you can reserve it for a long period of time. And you can see right here, there's a lot of different operating systems you can have on it. Normally I just run Ubuntu, but Windows actually can be pretty useful. That if you ever wanted a remote desktop, you could set up a Windows host on EC2, and then come back to it like from anywhere in the world. You could kind of pop onto your Windows host, and some companies use that for remote desktoping. And just to give you an idea of how things kind of price out. I think normally I have everyone on, I think they end up being T3 or T2 micros or smalls, because they're just really cheap. But you can see like you can get really heavy machines that are quite expensive, like $5 for this high-end machines per hour. So that's pretty much all I wanted to go over for how you, oops, need this thing to go away. That's like an overview of what servers there are. Let's launch one, so you get an overview of how you'd launch one. And then we'll log into one. And why don't I get a folder? Which I probably shouldn't, but so I usually get an Ubuntu one, and that's right here. And then I just usually get on x86 instead of ARM. We'll get Ubuntu, and then you can get all sorts of different ones like I showed before. We'll just do a T2 micro since I'm just demoing it, but of course if there is a purpose we could do something else. Maybe I can just minimize. Yeah, I just minimize. All right. And then you can launch like several at the same time. This is that spot instance where it's kind of auction priced. Placement group, this gives you the ability to put, say I wanted to get 5 servers. I could sit them right next to each other because I need them to communicate fast. And so placing them next to each other should make the communication have lower latency. A VPC is like creating like kind of like a subnet. If you ever do networking, kind of creates a smaller subnet of your network, and kind of firewalls out what parts things can talk to. And so this is like putting a user, saying that this server is like a user, and then therefore can do anything that that user could do. That can be useful sometimes. And I usually deal with almost none of these things, but I just wanted to show them. This one I always crank this up. Like having a tiny 8 GB hard drive is almost never big enough. So I'm just bumping it up to 32. You don't need it. You usually don't need anywhere close to what your laptop has. So this is how you can kind of control like a firewall on your server. Pretty common one that you guys might use right away. Obviously, you can put like explicit ports, but a very common one you guys will probably want is just HTTP and HTTPS. Where's HTTPS? There you go. All right, and then it gives you kind of an overview screen before you dedicate yourself to buying all this. Although it doesn't, surprisingly, it doesn't tell you how much you're about to pay. And we will create a new key. So it will tell you to create a key. And so for your team, you probably want to create one key for your whole team. And so we'll just create a AWS talk key. And then we'll launch into instance. So yeah, you have to have your key somewhere you can access easily. If you're using a Mac, you would generally use the terminal directly to, like, you'll open up terminal and then you'll SSH with that terminal. On Windows, I like to use Winscp, although there's another good tool called Xterm. And I'll show you kind of how, if you were on Windows, how you'd go about this. So you could just download Winscp to get the same tool if you wanted to do it from Windows. And we'll get the, so this is your public domain name. You could access it with this, or why don't I show you guys how to create an elastic IP as well? Because that is pretty useful. So there's a section called elastic IPs. You can allocate one. I believe you get one for free for every while you're having EC2 open. You can actually give Amazon ones that you already own too. Those we'll associate this one. Oh, now I don't know which one it was. These names are useless. If anyone ever goes to Amazon, fix that. Those names are completely useless. We should tag this as AWS talk. And I'll pop back here. Now it should show up. Oops, I need these. Okay, so now on my instance, this IP address is, I can access the server with this IP address and it won't change on me. So Amazon, if you don't do this, Amazon can just change your public IP address at any point. Now you're guaranteed that Amazon won't change it, which can be a lot of trouble if you're like hosting a website from it. They always start the user as Ubuntu if you're using Ubuntu as the operating system type, and then there won't be any password. But there will be an authentication. And I have a ton of keys there. I have to, and they're going to say that's insecure. You're going to ignore them. I mean, you can add a key phrase just as, I don't know if for sure it will work with Winscp anymore. Oops. And now associate it. should be able to log in. Connecting. It'll ask you, the very first time it'll ask you if you want to cache it. And now you're in. And now what's nice is with Winscp, you can just click here and you'll get a PuTTY instance up immediately. And you won't have to even log in. It would just remember it. Since I use a private key, I won't have to log in. So now I can control the server. I can do like a sudo apt get, and I can install things. I usually update first. Oh. And if you're familiar with Linux, you've probably done this a million times. I'm not going to upgrade because that might take a while. And why don't we get, I think it is Node.js. I actually don't know off the top of my head what Node is. Node.js. Maybe I can't apt get it. I might have to maybe have to W get it. I was just kind of showing how you could quickly Ubuntu. How you might be able to quickly and get your server ready to be like a web server. And then that will get us Node.js, looks like. And we have Node. So now you could, oops. Now you could kind of host your website from here. Of course, from Node, you can start npm installing lots of things. Let's go back. Oops. I got it right there where it's the hardest to click. All right, so then the other big one you might do is when you're not using it, you can stop it. So these can handle all the states. Another one that's actually really useful is create an image. So it will pretty much create a snapshot, and then that will show up in AMIs. And then once you have that AMI, you can launch another instance at that exact same snapshot. So that way, if you have some sort of big change that you don't know if it's going to break things, just create an image, and then later on you can come back to it and kind of launch another instance. Or you want to mirror things like I used to have like a crypto system, and then I could mirror it out to a bunch of different hosts. And okay, so yeah, I'll stop it for now. And then we'll pop over to, since we kind of covered EC2, we'll cover some basics of S3. And you'll notice this guy got logged out automatically. So then you can click here to get, oh, yeah, by the way, this was in Ohio the whole time. But I think I already mentioned that. So now we'll go over to S3, which is the second most likely. Well, actually, SES might be even more likely for you guys to touch.
Before you go into that, does anyone have any questions for Sean? I figure you can take some questions before you switch topics.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I'm blazing through everything. No questions? Or I guess I will. Oh. Anyone? I can't see anyone now.
You can go ahead and continue, I guess.
All right, so S3. So literally, Dropbox was just built as a GUI shim over S3. They like built that billion-dollar company by just creating a shim around this. So that's how powerful S3 is. And so again, S3, even though, so the bucket is usually associated with a region, although it can be mirrored to multiple regions. You can see I have a ton of buckets here already, but maybe I can, should I just create a bucket? I will see if I'm allowed to create another bucket. I know they have actually a limit on how many buckets you can create for one account. So we'll associate it with Ohio again, but you can see you can associate it with lots of locations. And we'll call it AWS talk. And to avoid any name collisions, I'll use a date int. All right, and then there's, so we give it a name. Oh, actually, you'll notice that I have a bunch of names where they're like www.somename.com, where you can actually, if you give it a URL, you can actually host your website out of S3 if it's just static files. So it's a great way to just host a static blog or something like that, or like a landing page. Not messing with any of this. I guess one of the biggest points might be how you deal with permissions. So sometimes you want to block everything. So this might be like a private, like this is more like your own Dropbox, or some backend part of your server. On the other side, you might want to allow everything. So let's say we're hosting. If we're going to host files to like a web internet, like we're going to be like a web host, then we probably want to have everything public. And for now, we can just have everything public. It doesn't really matter. So create the bucket. And I call that this. So now we'll jump into our bucket. And so in your bucket, you can create folders. You can, so let's, what should I upload? I didn't prepare for that. I'll upload this guy. That is not useful to anything. So it will show you what files you're uploading. Of course, you can get a nicer, like CyberDuck can make it so you can just drag over whole folders. But I won't show CyberDuck, I guess, this time. We'll grant read access to everyone. We will just put it in normal. There's a lot of different tiers of how you store your data. I guess I'll mention standard is the most common. So standard will give it, like it's saying, more than 3 availability centers. So this is, they're actually going to copy this file on the 3 actual data centers. So if literally like a data center blew up, you would still have 2 other data centers that would have to blow up before you'd lose your files. Another setup that's pretty interesting. So this will be quick access still, not as fast as CloudFront, but it will be still very fast. And then the other one that's pretty interesting is Glacier. This is for long-term storage. It might take you, like it's saying, it might take as much as hours to download the file because it's actually going to be stored in magnetic tapes. It's going to be very cheap, like much cheaper to store a file than it would be in standard for a long period of time. And that's the real reason you'd use this. This would be for like archives, like it's like they're saying deep archives. These would be like you had some sort of compliance records, like your company requires to keep records, mostly for compliance reasons. So we upload the file, and then we can go to the file and get all the information about the file. The most useful things are usually have the owner. So it will create a URL, an internal URL. That's usually pretty useful. And I think properties, I want to say that there's a nice, well, I mean, the name itself This would be how, within this bucket, you can just access this file using the API with this name. When you have foldering, it just adds the name with the slashes. So really, it's a flat bucket. It's a flat collection of files with just names that can have slashes in them. And then this URL would be able to download it. And that's pretty much it for S3. I guess the only other topic on S3 would be how you could set up web serving. And I will check. They've changed the UI since I used to do this. So I think it's properties now. Yeah, static web hosting. That's probably the one if you mess with anything here, the two biggest ones would be static web hosting and then maybe default encryption. So this would be automatically encrypting everything there. Static web hosting, so we could use a bucket. And I can't actually probably set this because I don't have an error doc or a index doc to give it, but I can show one that does. Yeah, why don't I show one that does, because that was pretty much the basics of how to set up an S3. And I will pop over to something that has this all set up. I'll do this one. Oh, maybe I'll do do one over. So you can see you have to create a 404 page and an index page, and that's really the only requirements. And then we go to properties, static hosting, and you see I have that as linked in. And then if we go to this URL will be hosting that website that's just being hosted out of that bucket. And hopefully everything should load. And this was just a page I made a while back or something. And you can see, like, it's just like if you went to a regular website. But the entire thing is just out of S3. There's no server. Yeah, I'm not running like a explicit server. This is kind of closer to the serverless paradigm. All right, so that's S3. Does anyone have any questions on S3? I guess I'm popping out of it, but no one has any questions about S3. We'll jump into simple email service because that will be something that you guys will more likely touch. Simple, and then we'll do Lambda at the final. That's the final one. Well, I don't know. People stick around. I can do more. Oh, SES will just run out of Northern Virginia. They don't have it in every location. So this is their email kind of platform. You can register domains. So that's how, these are the domains that I can email out of. And if you have a Route 53 email, so if you bought your domain name from Amazon, then it's trivial. Like, it will just automatically get pushed over. And actually from this screen, you can't see much more other than rule sets, so on the receiving emails, but you guys probably won't be dealing with receiving emails, so I'm not going to go into that detail. But let's jump over to start talking about Amazon's API. Amazon Web Services, JavaScript. I'm imagining most of you guys will use the JavaScript API, although the Python API is also very easy to work with. SES. So we'll start with SES. Although S3 is another one that you might pretty likely use. And they're pretty well documented. I'd say that Amazon does a pretty good job documenting. So this is how you kind of pull it in. You usually have to put what location you want to run it out of. And then you can see here, this is, they do a lot of things with promises. So everything is kind of asynchronous. that you're not going to, you know, you're going to do something and then something else and then something else. I guess not really asynchronous, but kind of promise setup. And then they're pretty well documented in terms of how you can kind of set up your email. You can also send raw. I don't know if they have that right here, but send raw would help you send if you needed to send kind of like data. Let's say you have an Excel attachment, then you're probably not going to be able to fit it into their format otherwise. If it's HTML, I think it just works this way. But if you start doing fancier things, you need to kind of send a raw, like an MIME format. Hopefully you guys won't have to deal with that, but you might. And you guys won't have to do bulk emailing. And don't worry about templates either. Probably just use the send email API. And then that's pretty much as easy as this little example right here. And then we can pop over to S3. So the other service I was talking about earlier. So there's actually two sides of S3 that you might access it via the browser, or you might access it via the server. We'll pop over to the server first, and we'll at the same time we'll add the browser side. You guys are probably not going to be creating buckets automatically, configuring buckets. But there should be more that they should talk about. Kind of surprised they don't talk about moving files around. But the really, really, really common thing that you guys will be interacting with is viewing and uploading to S3 from the browser. They kind of have a tutorial of exactly that. So I won't go into details again here. Cognito, I didn't talk about Cognito, but you guys might interact with Cognito. So this is like, remember I said there's IAM, which lets you create a user. Cognito lets you kind of have a pool of kind of anonymous users that you could, that can do actions on your behalf. And we could, I'll give you guys permissions to use Cognito if a tutorial uses it, like this, if you actually end up doing kind of upload and download. And this is like, I'd say following these guides are a good way to actually, like, there's many ways to download images or you get images from Amazon. There are many ways to upload, but their guides are obviously how they recommend doing it. So I would just go with that. Yeah, and then that is SES. We'll go over one last service. I know I don't know what this was actually blocked out for time-wise. But, oh, and does anyone have any questions about that or the APIs or anything related? I'm guessing no. I can't see anyone, so.
No.
We'll do Lambda. And you can search up here too. It can save you some time because they have so many services now. I think when I joined, when I first started using them, Lambda was in preview. They only had like a dozen services at most. I guess when I very first joined, they didn't even have Lambda yet. There's tons of Lambda functions. Why don't I go to a very simple Lambda function? I have a payment one. Yeah, I'll go with that. Payment, clear up that item. This is pretty neat that they have kind of, they give you a diagram of what services you're interacting with. I guess it like analyzes your code. And this code was written before Amazon even changed their API. So this might not be a perfect example. So in this case, this one will actually run a square up. We'll actually get a payment from a square up. So when someone charged a credit card, it would get alerted, and then put stuff in DynamoDB. I didn't cover DynamoDB much, but this is like a NoSQL database, and you can see I'm just like kind of trailing off to all these promises. So when one thing gets finished, the next thing we'll try to run, the next thing we'll try to run, the next thing we'll try to run. I could have done this with promises to make the code less dirty, but this was a rushed thing I made when I was in college. So that's generally what it would look like. Let's go to one that's maybe more up to date, so it actually has the right interface. Well, let's create one actually. Let's create one. That will be more interesting. Create a function. And the idea, this is this whole serverless. You might hear people talk about serverless. It's like pretty hyped, probably overly hyped, but there's use cases that actually make a lot of sense. When you want to just receive something based on another API, you don't have to really think about, like, if it's a really small service or something you're demoing, it might be a lot of lift to create a server and leave that server always running to do that one task. It might just make more sense to, instead of doing that, just create a Lambda that can receive, that can get a callback. So I will just leave the default here, and let's test it. So I think I might just be able to get away with this. Oh, gotta give it a name. Test event. Great. And then this will actually run it, and we can see. It's not going to give me my logs at the bottom. It used to give me the logs at the bottom. Now I have to click here. We can see what it logged. It probably didn't log anything because I probably didn't console anything. Ah, here we go. Here's the execution results. So we got, it sent back this to the server, whoever requested it, or to the client. This is the server. And then you can pretty much do anything in JavaScript here. Some crazy stuff you can do is this will trigger Node. So and you have this folder here. You can actually compile things in C++ and have Node trigger those things to run. We had last spring, University of Maryland group actually did that with some image recognition. And you can allocate how much memory your function will need. And there's also a timeout period. So how long will you let the function run before you want to stop paying for it, for that run, that function call. And what's really neat is it's pretty nice on how you can kind of manage all your code right here. You can also upload entire zips, and that's how you have to upload the zip if you want to put compile code. Normally you deal with it in Node.js, like that would be the entry language, but there's actually, and can I do this? Maybe I can do this here. Yeah, you can see they actually support several other languages. I would say in most cases it makes the most sense to do it in Node.js because the spin up time for most of these other languages is pretty long, so it doesn't make much sense. And actually, if you wanted to use another language, you could just you could do it, like I said, you can compile a C++ file and just put it here and then have Node.js call into it. One trick with that is you need to compile it with Amazon's. There's the Amazon Linux, which is different than Ubuntu Linux. You need to compile it on Amazon Linux if if you want to actually run C++, or C or C++ or any compiled language. And that's pretty much it for Lambda. And then there's many, I guess I'll talk about triggers. There's many triggers that could trigger a Lambda. You can see there's lots of things they talk about. And they have partners. So the idea is that this is how you can quickly set up a connection to another external service. A common one that people talk about is S3. So when something happens in S3, you get triggered. SNS is kind of a way that Amazon, SQS and SNS are ways that Amazon lets you kind of wire services together, coordinate services. You can even see the little photo. It looks like a coordination system. What I do with this is with SES can receive an email, and then SES will forward it to SNS automatically, and then I will pick that up. SNS will forward it to a Lambda, and then Lambda can automatically that can then email my Gmail account, or store it in S3 as an archive, or store it in DynamoDB as an archive, or store metadata about it. Another random cool one is Amazon has an equivalent to Git, or they have a Git server running, like kind of the equivalent of a GitLab, but you can wire things to it, which is kind of neat. And I guess the other one that's pretty common is a load balancer one. So let's say you notice that your servers are getting hit with a huge amount of, your load balancer will tell you that your servers are getting hit with over, let's say 80% utilization. Then you can have a Lambda get triggered that will spin up like 3 more EC2 instances to your load balancer. And kind of build all those kind of DevOps-y type tasks. So Lambda is really powerful, really, and pretty easy to get used to use. And you could, the kind of serverless paradigm would be use Lambda with S3. So statically host your website with S3, and then use Lambda to do all of the kind of dynamic things. So like if someone has, I think I had I go back here. I have a good example for that. Can I pop back to Lambdas? I think I have something for Edge. So that was a completely, yeah. So this, and if I can I get Edge 3 back up? Yeah. If I go back here, there should be a make a request page. I don't know how any of this will look anymore because this has not been touched for a really long time, but it has a drop uploader for files and some of these requests, and then you click submit. And this submit triggers a Lambda, this Lambda, which then, if I go here, I get this to show. And you guys will have access, I should have access to all these, which will actually go through and put information in a database with DynamoDB, and then put some files in S3, and send an email to them, thanking them for making the purchase, and also send me an email to say I need to do something about this purchase. So that's how you can kind of, that's how you could use Lambda. And I guess, does anyone have any questions on Lambda? I'm sorry this wasn't more interactive. One of these days I should make a lab kind of version of this, which is like actually, where you actually do something, where it's not just me talking at you. And I guess the only other service I will just really quickly show is Route 53. And this I won't really show any dynamics. I'll just show that it exists. And that I recommend this if you want to buy domain names. I'd say it's not the cheapest. Like you can probably play games and find a cheaper place, but it's really easy to manage. So I'm willing to pay up the premium to get the nicer management. So we'll just go to this guy. By default, it makes a lot of the records for you. But the one record you probably make is an A record. If you do anything with domain names, you'll recognize A records. And in my case, I pointed this to a CloudFront, which sits in front of my S3. If we go to another one, whoops, I popped out too far. Back to hosted regions. You can see this guy has a lot of records. One of them is the chat server, and you can just give an A record for an IP address, which is one of those elastic IP addresses. And now you can kind of link it to something. You can also, another neat thing you can do is you can create, if you create a bucket, you can actually have, you can kind of alias, you can create kind of short links for things. So in this case, we short linked to Facebook. That can be pretty nice. And I think that's pretty much what I wanted to go over in this overview. Now, does anyone have any questions? No, it'll pop up in the. Pop up into this one.
If you don't have any questions right now, but you think of them later, you can go ahead and just shoot Sean an email or something like that.
Yeah, shoot me an email or put it in university devs, and then everyone can kind of see.
Yeah, Zulip would probably be better. You're right.
But if it's like detailed or for a very specific use case, I understand just putting it there. Trying to think of anything else. Yeah, that was just about everything I wanted to cover. Also, if you have trouble, I plan to within this week send you guys how to create an account, or how to have an account within my account, so that way you guys already have an account. And then I won't create an EC2 instance for you guys automatically, but if you guys need one, I can create one. And if you guys need a bucket, I can create one. So any type of resource you need, you can create it.
And it might take a day or so, or a little bit more, but we'll go ahead and edit up this video and post it to our YouTube channel and post it in the Zulip chat, so you guys can go back and review some of this information that Sean went over, and sort of go through the different pieces that he covered today.
Oh, another big point is there is a ton of really good resources that Amazon produces on how to use these. I think there's reInvent is their conference, and reInvent covers these extremely well. That when I first learned about Amazon, the reInvent was probably the most useful useful way to learn all these services. And Amazon is probably, I don't know if it's actually the biggest cloud, because Azure actually is pretty competitive in terms of the cloud space, but it's definitely the biggest one in startup space. It's great, sir. It's a great tool to know. Yeah.
I guess on that note, we'll go ahead and end the call, and we'll subsume our regular meeting schedules with everyone.
Awesome. Thanks guys for coming. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.
You too.
Take care.